I didn't know my life would split open at 3 a.m., not on a battlefield overseas, but on the front steps of my own house. The first wrong thing was the door. Unlocked. I had told my husband Caleb 100 times, lock it, always. Not because our neighborhood was dangerous, because I'd seen what safe turns into the second you get careless. I stepped inside like I was clearing a hostile building. Quiet. Listening. My duffel's still on my shoulder. I'd imagined Lily running down the stairs in her pajamas, squealing, "Mom!" I'd imagined Caleb half asleep, smiling, pretending he hadn't missed me. Instead, the house smelled like old food and stale wine. Dishes crusted in the sink, mail everywhere. Unopened bills bleeding across the counter like someone had given up halfway through being an adult. Caleb's keys, his wallet, a half-tipped glass. Things scattered that never used to be scattered. My throat tightened as I climbed the stairs. Our bedroom door was open. Caleb was sprawled across the bed in jeans and a sweater, one arm hanging off the edge. An empty wine bottle on the nightstand, another on the floor. His face puffy, hair a mess. The kind of sleep that isn't rest, it's escape. Caleb. My voice came out flat, controlled. The voice you use when panic gets people killed. He jolted, blinking at me like I was a ghost. You're home? Where's Lily? He frowned, trying to assemble a thought. She's at Mom's, Vivian's. I emailed you. I didn't get any email. I took one step closer. Why is our daughter at her grandmother's at 3 a.m? Caleb rubbed his face, hands trembling. She's been there since Tuesday. Tuesday. It was Friday. 3 days. My daughter had been on Vivian Blackwood's mountain property for 3 days, and no one told me. I turned without another word, already moving, because something in my bones was screaming that this wasn't about a child's sleepover. Caleb's voice cracked behind me. It's the middle of the night. I didn't stop, because I wasn't just going to pick up my daughter. I was about to find out what my husband and his mother had been hiding, and why Lily's favorite stuffed elephant was missing from her bed. I'm Renee Blackwood, 34. For most people, that name sounds like it belongs to a woman who grew up with money, a woman who never had to look at a price tag. The truth is, I married into the name. I wasn't born in the mountains or raised in some polished farmhouse with Bible verses stitched into pillows. I grew up in a small town where people fixed what broke because replacing it was a luxury. My mom worked double shifts at a clinic. My dad was the kind of man who didn't talk about love. He showed it. Oil on his hands, a packed lunch. The heat kept on, even if he had to skip new boots. And I grew up with a simple rule. If you promise someone safety, you keep it. That rule followed me into the service. I enlisted at 19, not because I was chasing glory, but because I wanted stability, and because I needed to believe the world could be organized into something that made sense. Training did that for me. It taught me how to think under pressure, how to read a room, how to hear danger before it announces itself. And then I met Caleb. Not in some movie moment, not in a candlelit bar. I met him at a fundraiser for military families. I was home on leave, wearing a dress I wasn't comfortable in, holding a paper cup of punch like it was a grenade. He was volunteering, tall, polite, the kind of man who smiled with his whole face. He offered me a chair when I was standing, asked me questions without looking at my chest, laughed when I told him I'd rather be cleaning my weapon than networking. I'm Caleb, he said, and his voice had that gentle steadiness I craved after months of noise. We talked all night. He told me he worked in county administration, that his family had land up in Pennsylvania. Not fancy, he said, like he needed me to know he wasn't spoiled. He told me his mother was intense. Vivian's old school, he warned, rolling his eyes like a boy who'd spent his whole life trying to please a woman who never smiled. I should have listened harder to the way he said her name, because even then, there was something in his tone, respect mixed with fear. We dated long distance at first. Video calls in different time zones, Me in a barracks room, hair still damp from a cold shower. Him at a kitchen table with warm light, always asking if I'd eaten, always saying, "You're safe with me, Renee." That phrase hooked itself around my ribs. I didn't realize how badly I needed someone to say that until he did. The signs were there early, but they were small. The kind you excuse because love makes you generous. When Vivian called during our dates, Caleb always answered. When I met her for the first time, she didn't hug me. She didn't ask my name twice. She looked me up and down like she was evaluating a product. "So you're the soldier," she said, not warmly. "You must be very stubborn." Caleb laughed awkwardly, trying to smooth it over. "Mom, Renee's amazing." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. I remember that night clearly. The way her fingers tightened around her teacup, the way she asked me questions that weren't questions. "How long will you keep doing that job? Do you want children? Do you know what it means to be a wife?" I answered politely. I kept my shoulders down. I told myself she was just protective. But when we left, Caleb exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. "She'll come around," he promised. I believed him. We married 2 years later. Simple ceremony, small crowd, mostly my friends from the service and his family sitting in a stiff row. Caleb put the ring on my finger with trembling hands. He cried. I cried. Vivian didn't. Lily came a year after that, and the moment I held my daughter, warm and wailing, I thought, this is it. This is the point of everything. I'd been trained to survive, but Lily gave me a reason to live. I was deployed when she turned 3, again when she turned 6. Each time I left, I told Caleb the same thing. Keep her safe, keep her loved, and do not let your mother control our home. He'd always nodded, always said, of course. So when I came home early and found the door unlocked, the kitchen abandoned, my husband drunk, and my daughter missing, it wasn't just fear that hit me. It was the sudden, sick realization that I had been trusting the wrong person in the one place I couldn't afford to be wrong. Looking back now, I can trace the cracks. At the time, they felt like normal marital strain, distance, fatigue, the kind of erosion people blame on deployments and time zones. But cracks don't appear overnight. They spread quietly. The first shift happened after Lily turned 6. She'd always been a bright child, curious, stubborn in the way intelligent kids are. She asked questions that didn't fit into neat boxes. She negotiated bedtime like it was a peace treaty. She hated vegetables. She talked back sometimes. Normal. Healthy. Alive. But Caleb started using a word that didn't sit right with me. Disrespectful. He'd say it during video calls. "She's becoming disrespectful, Renee." I'd laugh gently. "She's 6. She argues about everything because she's thinking. That's not a crime." He'd sigh in a way that felt heavier each time. "Mom says she needs firmer structure." There it was again. Vivian. "She doesn't live in our house," I reminded him. "She raised me." I didn't say what I was thinking. And look how afraid you still are of disappointing her. Another shift came in the finances. We weren't wealthy, but we weren't struggling either. My salary was steady. Caleb worked for the county. We had a modest house, savings, a predictable life. Then he started mentioning pressure. "Things are tighter than I expected." "Tighter how?" I asked. "Just bills." When I asked to see the numbers, he'd wave it off. "I've got it handled." That phrase always sounds harmless until you realize it means you're being shut out. Then there were the silences. I'd call after a patrol and Lily wouldn't be there. "She's at Mom's for the night." Again? She likes the farm. Lily liked goats and mud. She didn't like her grandmother. I knew that because once, months earlier, Lily had whispered through the phone, "Mom, Grandma says bad girls don't get dessert." "That's not new," I joked. "No," Lily said quietly. "She says bad girls don't get love." I'd gone still. "What did you do that was bad?" "I didn't clean my room fast enough." I'd felt a flicker of heat in my chest then, but I'd swallowed it. Long distance makes confrontation complicated. When I brought it up to Caleb, he sounded defensive. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" Mom's old-fashioned, that's all. Old-fashioned didn't explain the way Lily's voice changed when she mentioned Vivian. It didn't explain why Caleb had started deferring to his mother on parenting decisions. She has experience, he'd argue. So do we, I said, but it wasn't equal anymore. Vivian's influence grew like mold, quiet, spreading in the dark. She ran her retreat center up in the mountains. I knew about it in the way you know something exists but don't examine it closely. Religious counseling, discipline, spiritual growth. Whenever I asked specifics, Caleb brushed it aside. It's just structure for kids who need guidance. And what qualifies as needing guidance? He'd hesitate. Behavior issues. Like what? Talking back, defiance, disrespect. The same word again. I remember one video call 3 days before I came home. Lily wasn't in frame. Where is she? I asked. She's asleep. It's 6 p.m. She was tired. Something in Caleb's eyes flickered. Fear? Guilt? I couldn't tell through the pixelated screen, but my instincts stirred. Are you okay? I asked him. Of course. But his smile looked rehearsed. And now, standing in our bedroom at 3 a.m., watching him tremble as he told me Lily had been at Vivian's since Tuesday. Every ignored sign snapped into focus. The financial stress. The secretive emails I never received. The sudden insistence that Lily needed respect training. The way Caleb wouldn't meet my eyes. This wasn't a sleepover. This was escalation. And whatever had been planted months ago had grown into something rotten. Something deliberate. As I drove into the mountains, headlights slicing through darkness, one thought kept repeating. What did you do, Caleb? Because whatever the answer was, it was big enough to make him drink himself unconscious instead of waiting up for me, and big enough to make him lie. The mountain roads were empty. 40 minutes of curves and black trees pressing in from both sides. My headlights caught nothing but gravel, fog, and the occasional reflective sign warning drivers to slow down. I didn't slow down. Vivian Blackwood's property sat deep beyond a long gravel driveway that cut through thick woods. I'd only been there twice. Both times I left feeling like I'd stepped into a place that didn't belong in the same century as the rest of the world. The farmhouse lights were on at 3:47 a.m. That was the second wrong thing. I parked hard and stepped out, gravel crunching under my boots. The air was colder here, thinner, too quiet. The front door opened before I reached it. Vivian stood there, backlit by harsh yellow light. Tall, bone-thin, gray hair pulled into that severe bun, a long white nightgown that made her look almost holy, if holiness had eyes that calculated. "Renee," she said calmly, "Caleb called. I knew you'd come." "Where is Lily?" Her lips curved slightly, sleeping. "I'll wake her." "You shouldn't," she replied. "She's in reflection." My pulse slowed instead of quickened. Reflection. What does that mean? She didn't answer directly. "You always were too emotional, Renee. Children need firmness, structure, not indulgence." I stepped past her without another word. The house smelled wrong. Bleach, heavy, aggressive, and underneath it, something damp and organic. "Renee," Vivian snapped sharply behind me. "You're going to wake the other children." I stopped. "The other children?" She exhaled as if I were slow. "My program. Parents send them here. Troubled ones. We help them reset." I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. "Where is my daughter?" "In the back," she said evenly, learning humility. I was already moving. Through the kitchen. Past a stainless steel sink that looked too clean. Out the back door into darkness. The yard stretched wide and shadowed, tree line thick at the edges. The moon gave just enough light to reveal shapes, sheds, posts. And then a sound. Small, thin, crying. I ran toward it, pulling my phone out and switching on the flashlight. The beam cut across grass, then dirt, and then I stopped. There was a hole in the ground, about 4 feet deep, 3 feet across, and inside it, my daughter. Lily stood there barefoot in her pajamas, mud up to her knees, arms wrapped around herself, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "Mom?" she whispered, like she wasn't sure I was real. I was in that hole before I remember moving. I lifted her up and she clung to me, her body ice cold, soaked, trembling violently. "It's okay," I murmured, forcing my voice steady. "I've got you." She buried her face in my neck. I tried to be good. My jaw tightened. "How long have you been here?" "I don't know," she sobbed. "Grandma says bad girls sleep in graves, so they learn." Graves. The word hit like a physical blow. White-hot rage rose in me, but I swallowed it down. Lily needed calm, not fury. I wrapped my jacket around her small body. "You're safe. I'm taking you home." She grabbed my collar tightly. "Mom, don't look in the other one." I froze. "What other one?" She shook her head violently. "Please don't look." My flashlight beam drifted slowly across the yard. 20 feet away, another hole, covered with wooden boards. Something primal in me shifted. "Close your eyes," I whispered. She obeyed instantly. Still holding her, I walked toward the second hole, one hand gripping her, the other pulling the boards aside. The smell hit first. Decay. Earth. Something chemical. I angled the flashlight downward. Small bones. A skull. Unmistakably human. Unmistakably a child. Fabric scraps. Dirt. And a metal tag like a dog tag, half buried in soil. For 1 second, the world tilted. Then training took over. Crime scene. Multiple victims. I took 3 photos. Clear. Steady. Capturing the tag. Replaced the boards exactly as I found them. Then I turned and carried Lily toward the house. Vivian stood in the kitchen holding a cup of tea. "As I was saying," she began smoothly, "it was only an hour. The cold builds character." I looked at her. "Sit down." She blinked. "Don't move," I continued quietly. "Don't speak. And don't think about running." Something in my voice made her sit. I didn't argue. Didn't yell. I carried Lily back to the truck, started it, blasted the heat. Her shaking wouldn't stop. "Mom," she whispered, eyes wide. "The girl from last year didn't come back." I swallowed hard. "What girl?" "She screamed one night, then Grandma said she ran away." I pulled out my phone and dialed Donald. When he answered groggily, I said the words calmly. "I need you at Vivian Blackwood's property right now. Bring backup. Call state police. I just found a dead child in my mother-in-law's backyard, and there may be more." There was silence. Then, "I'm 10 minutes out." I looked back at the farmhouse. Vivian stood at the window, not afraid, angry. And in that moment, I knew something worse than negligence had happened here. This wasn't discipline. This was systematic, deliberate. And my husband had sent our daughter into it. The police sirens arrived before my hands stopped shaking. 4 patrol cars tore down the gravel driveway, lights cutting across the trees like violent lightning. Donald stepped out first, broad shoulders, gray at his temples, eyes that had seen too much of humanity already. He took one look at Lily wrapped in my jacket and swore under his breath. "Jesus, Renee." "She was in a hole," I said flatly. "There's another one with remains, at least one confirmed." His expression shifted instantly, from concern to command. Within minutes, the property was crawling with officers. State police, then FBI, Child Protective Services. I stayed in the truck with Lily. I kept my voice soft, even when the back door of the farmhouse burst open and officers escorted children out. 3 of them at first. Small, under 10, hollow-eyed. No coats. One little boy looked at me and asked, "Are we allowed to leave?" That question lodged somewhere deep and permanent. Ambulances came. Paramedics wrapped blankets around shivering bodies. The yard was flooded with harsh white light. Investigators began digging. By dawn, they had found 4 graves. 4. I watched from the driver's seat, Lily asleep against my chest after a doctor confirmed mild hypothermia and bruising. Donald came over as the sky turned pale gray. "They've identified one from a tag already," he said quietly. 9-year-old girl missing from Pittsburgh last year. Parents thought she was at summer camp. My stomach clenched. The others? "Working on it," He hesitated. We'll need to talk to Caleb. The name felt foreign. My husband, the father of my child, the man who promised to keep her safe. I know, I said. We checked into a hotel 2 towns over. A suite with 2 beds. Bright. Warm. Safe. Lily slept until nearly noon, curled tight like she was still bracing for cold earth. A pediatric doctor came, gentle and thorough, documented everything, said therapy would be necessary. Children don't just shake this off, she told me quietly. When Lily finally woke, she scanned the room in panic, then saw me. You stayed, she whispered. I always will. She relaxed slightly. I waited until her breathing steadied before asking the question that felt like stepping on glass. Did Daddy know you were coming here? Her eyes filled. He drove me, she said softly. He said Grandma would teach me to be good. My chest tightened. What did you do that was so bad? She began to cry. I didn't eat my broccoli, and I said I didn't want to clean my room. I just wanted you to come home. Normal. Ordinary. 6-year-old behavior. Caleb had sent our daughter into a hole in the ground because she didn't eat vegetables. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door. I leaned over the sink and stared at my reflection. The soldier in me was steady, tactical, already planning next moves. The mother in me wanted to break something, but anger wouldn't help Lily. Control would. I stepped back out, composed. Daddy made a mistake, I said carefully. A very big one. She sniffled. Is Grandma going to jail? Yes. Good. Her voice was harder than it should have been at 7. By afternoon, Donald returned with updates. 6 more kids found in a locked basement room, he said grimly. Malnourished, bruised, terrified. My hands curled into fists. 4 confirmed graves so far, possibly more. And Vivian? In custody, still claiming it was therapeutic discipline. Of course she was. Caleb? I asked. Donald hesitated. He says he didn't know about the graves. Says he thought it was strict parenting. I laughed once, short and hollow. He sent her there. Donald nodded. That's going to matter. When he left, I opened my laptop. I should have researched Vivian years ago. Her website looked polished. Testimonials, Bible verses, smiling children. But deeper online, buried in forums, were other stories. Kids coming back withdrawn. Nightmares. Parents silenced. An investigation 3 years ago that went nowhere. Dismissed. I felt something heavier than rage settle in. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This had structure, protection, money. And Caleb had participated, whether knowingly or not. That realization didn't feel explosive. It felt final. When I finally called him, he answered on the first ring. Renee, did you know? I asked quietly. Silence. Know what? About the holes. A pause, too long. No, I swear. Mom said it was reflection therapy. She buried children in her yard. His breath hitched. I didn't know. You drove our daughter there. She needed discipline. She needed parenting. His voice broke. You weren't here. That sentence hung in the air. You weren't here. As if my service excused his failure. As if my absence justified putting our child in a grave. I closed my eyes. I trusted you. I was trying to help. You almost got her killed. Silence again. Then, quietly, I didn't think it would go that far. That was the moment something inside me shut down. Because that sentence told me everything. He hadn't known. He hadn't asked. He hadn't cared enough to check. And ignorance, when you're responsible for a child, is not innocence. It's negligence. I ended the call without saying goodbye. I sat on the edge of the bed while Lily watched cartoons quietly, still wrapped in a blanket. I realized something then. This wasn't just about Vivian. It wasn't just about buried children. It was about betrayal. The kind that comes from inside your own home. And I wasn't done uncovering how deep it went. The next 48 hours dismantled my marriage piece by piece. The FBI called first. Agents Frank Morrison and Sarah Chen requested a formal statement. I brought Lily's medical report, the photos from my phone, and every message Caleb had sent me over the last month. Agent Chen's handshake was firm. her eyes sharper than most. My niece went through a program similar to this, she told me quietly before we began. Not Vivian's, but close enough. That explained the intensity behind her calm. I gave them everything, from the unlocked door to the hole to the bones. When I finished, Morrison leaned back slightly. Did your husband benefit financially from referring children? The question landed like a blow. I don't know, I answered honestly. Check your joint accounts, he said. That night, after Lily fell asleep in the hotel suite, I opened our banking app. At first, nothing looked strange. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. Then I noticed transfers, $5,000 deposits, irregular, sometimes twice in 1 month, labeled consulting. My heart began to pound slowly. I clicked deeper. Over 3 years, $100,000. I stared at the number until it blurred. Caleb's financial stress, the vague talk of bills, the unexplained tension. It hadn't been stress. It had been guilt. I called him. You want to explain the consulting payments? Silence. Then defensive. Mom said it was referral compensation, just marketing. For what? For families who needed help. For $5,000 a child? Another silence. How many? I asked. I don't know. How many, Caleb? Maybe 15. 15 children. 15 families. Sent to a woman who buried kids in her yard. My voice stayed calm, which scared him more than yelling would have. Did you ever visit during the program? No, Mom said it disrupted the process. And you accepted that? She's my mother. And Lily is your daughter. That hit. He started crying then. I didn't know it was that bad. You didn't want to know. The story escalated quickly. Within days, the investigation widened. Marcus, my old military colleague who now worked in cybersecurity, sent me encrypted files. Renee, he said over a secure call, this isn't just about Vivian. He had traced the LLC tied to the retreat. New Beginnings Holdings, owned 50-50 by Vivian and Harrison Blackwood, Vivian's brother, a county judge. The judge who handled juvenile family cases. Complaints against the retreat? Dismissed in his courtroom. The social worker who investigated 3 years ago? Harrison's ex-wife. She'd retired shortly after clearing Vivian, and she'd bought a house in Florida far beyond her salary range. The money trail was thick. $3 million over 5 years. Some paid in cash. Some funneled through shell accounts. Some landing in accounts tied directly to Caleb. Not massive sums, but enough to bind him to the operation. He wasn't a mastermind, but he was complicit, and the realization carved something permanent through me. Family backlash came fast. Vivian's arrest made local news. Within hours, Caleb's aunt called me. How dare you drag this family through mud? I found children in graves, I replied. She was helping troubled kids. She buried them. You soldiers see enemies everywhere. I hung up. Then Caleb's cousin texted, you destroyed your own marriage. No. Caleb had done that when he chose money and obedience over his child. Even his father, who had divorced Vivian decades ago, left me a voicemail. I always knew she was extreme, he admitted quietly. But Caleb, I didn't think he'd be stupid enough to follow her. Stupid. The word felt both accurate and insufficient. The media began circling. New Beginnings Discipline Camp exposed. Multiple graves discovered. Reporters called my phone nonstop. I ignored them. My only focus was Lily. But escalation didn't stop there. Agent Chen called one evening. We've identified 17 families Caleb directly referred, she said. 3 of those children are deceased. 4 are still missing. I sat down slowly. Does he know that? Yes. What did he say? He says he thought it was strict faith-based discipline. I closed my eyes. How convenient. We're negotiating cooperation, Morrison added on speaker. If he testifies against Harrison and Vivian, it will reduce his charges. Charges? I repeated. Conspiracy, child endangerment, financial participation. I felt something strange, not satisfaction. Not anger, just clarity. My marriage was over. Not because Caleb was a monster, but because he was weak. Weak enough to look away. Weak enough to take money. Weak enough to send his daughter into darkness and hope it wasn't too dark. The confrontation happened at his sister Melody's house. I walked in. He stood up immediately. He looked smaller than I remembered. "I never meant for anyone to die," he said before I spoke. "I know." That surprised him. "I believe you didn't intend murder," he exhaled in relief. "But intention doesn't erase consequence." He broke then. "I was trying to provide. You were deployed half the time. I felt useless." "So you let your mother define strength." He didn't deny it. "She said I was too soft," he whispered. "And you proved her right." The room went silent. "I'm cooperating," he said. "I'm giving them everything." "Good. You're divorcing me?" "Yes." He swallowed hard. "Can I see Lily?" "When the court decides." "Renee, please. I love her." "You loved money more." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I never stopped loving her. You stopped protecting her." And for a parent, that's the same thing. By the end of the week, FBI agents had raided Harrison's home office. They found documentation, permanent placements, code for elimination, payments from wealthy parents who didn't want problem children, exposing affairs, embezzlement, or scandals. This wasn't just discipline. It was silencing. And Caleb had been a small cog in a much larger machine. But small cogs still turn wheels. And wheels crush children. The investigation became national. More arrests, more headlines, more graves. And in the middle of it all, my daughter asked one night, "Mom, did Daddy know they would hurt me?" I sat beside her bed. I don't think he understood how bad it was. She looked at me carefully. That means he didn't care enough to check. I froze. 7 years old. And she understood accountability better than grown men. I brushed her hair back gently. "You are never going back there. Ever." She nodded. And in that moment, escalation stopped being about law enforcement. It became about rebuilding, about choosing strength over comfort, about never confusing obedience with love again. But I hadn't hit my lowest point yet. That was still coming. The house felt different when we finally returned. Clean. Quiet. Too quiet. Vivian was in jail. Harrison had been suspended, pending indictment. Caleb had moved out. Court order, pending investigation. But absence doesn't equal peace. Lily refused to sleep alone the first night back. She lay curled against me in the master bedroom, clutching the stuffed elephant I'd found in her grandmother's house, stuffed in a cabinet like something disposable. Around 2 a.m., she woke, screaming, "Don't cover it! I'm good! I'm good!" I held her while her body shook violently. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're home." She sobbed into my shoulder. I tried so hard. I felt something fracture inside me. Because the worst part wasn't the hole. It wasn't the bones. It was that my daughter believed she deserved it. The court hearing for temporary custody happened a week later. Caleb sat across the room from me. He looked exhausted, hollow. When the judge reviewed the charges, financial conspiracy, child endangerment, Caleb didn't argue. He didn't even look at me. When the judge granted me full temporary custody with no visitation until the criminal case progressed, Caleb closed his eyes like he'd expected it. But when he stood to leave, he finally looked at Lily. She turned her face away. That broke him more than the ruling. The investigation kept expanding. More parents arrested, more buried secrets, more interviews. The media turned vicious. Headlines didn't just say Blackwood conspiracy. They said local soldier's husband tied to child abuse ring. My name attached to his disgrace. I thought I was prepared for that. I wasn't. Neighbors stared. Parents at Lily's school whispered. One woman actually asked me at pickup, "Did you know?" I looked her dead in the eye. I found my daughter in a grave. She never asked again. But public judgment wasn't what nearly broke me. It was the FBI's discovery 3 weeks later. Agent Chen called me in personally. She handed me a folder. "We found scheduling documents," she said carefully. Inside were internal discipline progression plans. One name circled in red. Lily Blackwood. Phase 1, 3 days isolation pit. Phase 2, 7 days. Phase 3, permanent placement. Permanent placement. Code for homicide. Date scheduled. 3 days after the night I arrived. If I had returned on my original deployment schedule, if my flight hadn't been moved up, if I had believed Caleb's email excuse, Lily would have been dead, buried, cataloged, forgotten. The room felt smaller. My lungs wouldn't fill. Agent Chen's voice sounded distant. You got there in time. 3 days. That number repeated like a heartbeat. 3 days. 3 days. 3 days. I walked out of the building and sat in my car. And for the first time since that night, I cried. Not controlled tears. Not silent ones. Violent, shaking sobs. Because soldiers are trained for enemy fire. Not for realizing your child was scheduled for elimination by her own family. That night, I sat on the porch long after Lily fell asleep. The sky was clear, peaceful, and I felt none of it. I thought about the 7 children whose names I had forced myself to memorize, about their parents receiving calls that shattered them, about Caleb's weakness, about my own absence. Because even though I knew logically this wasn't my fault, emotion doesn't care about logic. I was deployed. I wasn't here. I trusted him. I trusted wrong. Lily stepped onto the porch quietly. She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. Are you thinking about the hole? She asked softly. I nodded. She leaned against me. I'm glad you came early. So am I. She studied my face carefully. You look sad. I'm allowed to be, I said gently. She considered that. Grandma said crying is weak. I swallowed. Grandma was wrong about a lot of things. She rested her head on my arm. I don't feel bad anymore, she said after a moment. What do you feel? Mad sometimes, but safe. Safe. That word hit differently now. Not something promised, something earned. The darkest part wasn't discovering the graves. It wasn't confronting Caleb. It wasn't the public humiliation. It was in realizing how close I came to losing her. The what-ifs crept in like shadows. What if I'd been 1 day later? What if I'd trusted the email? What if I hadn't noticed the unlocked door? Each scenario ended the same way. With dirt. With a grave. With my daughter gone. I stopped sleeping properly. Any sound at night jolted me awake. Any silence felt suspicious. I checked Lily's breathing more times than I'll ever admit. Trauma, it stays in the nervous system, in the quiet, in the air, and in that darkness. This wouldn't end with prison sentences. It wouldn't end with headlines. I would make sure Lily never mistook obedience for love again. I would teach her strength without cruelty, authority without fear, because monsters don't always look like strangers. Sometimes they call themselves family. And sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't violence, it's weakness. But the lowest point is only a pause before power shifts, and mine was about to. Power doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes quietly, through evidence, through truth, through the moment you realize you're no longer afraid. The turning point began with a phone call from Agent Morrison. We need you to come in, he said. We've completed financial analysis. I expected more corruption, more buried money. What I didn't expect was this. Caleb had agreed to testify fully, not just against Vivian, not just against Harrison, against everyone, including himself. When I sat across from him in the federal building conference room, he looked thinner, paler, like the weight of denial had finally collapsed. I'm taking the plea, he said before I spoke. How long? 5 years, maybe less with cooperation. I absorbed that without reacting. They found more payments, he continued, not just referral fees. My stomach tightened. What kind? He swallowed hard. Harrison paid bonuses, extra, for difficult placements. My voice stayed steady. What qualifies as difficult? He couldn't meet my eyes. Kids who talked too much. Kids whose parents had reputations to protect. There it was. Not discipline. Silencing. And Lily? I asked. His head snapped up quickly. I never took money for Lily. Did you check what would happen to her? His silence answered. I thought, he started weakly, I thought Mom would scare her, that she'd come back more obedient. You outsourced parenting to a criminal. He flinched at the word. Criminal. Because now it was official, documented, proven. I didn't know about permanent placement, he whispered. But you knew she hurt children. That he couldn't deny. And that was enough. The FBI later uncovered internal emails between Harrison and wealthy clients. Parents who had paid $50,000 not for discipline, but for silence. One pharmaceutical executive, a state senator, a local businessman, children who had discovered affairs, embezzlement, fraud. The program wasn't about correction. It was about control. And the turning point for me wasn't rage. It was clarity. This wasn't random evil. It was organized, calculated, protected by power, and now that power structure was collapsing. The federal indictments came fast after that. Vivian, life without parole. Harrison, life without parole. The social worker, 20 years. 2 officers who buried reports, 15 each. 3 wealthy parents charged with conspiracy and murder. National coverage exploded, but my personal turning point came in family court. The judge reviewed the evidence, Caleb's financial involvement, his signed plea agreement, Lily's recorded statement. When the judge asked Lily, gently, if she wanted visitation with her father, she held my hand tightly. No, she said. The courtroom was silent. The judge nodded slowly. Full custody granted to Renee Blackwood. No visitation until further order. Caleb closed his eyes. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel anger. I felt resolution. That night, Lily and I celebrated quietly. Pizza on the living room floor. Blankets. A movie. No cameras. No reporters. Just peace. Halfway through the movie, she looked up at me. Did you win? I thought about that. I don't know if this is winning, I said carefully. Grandma and Uncle Harrison are in jail, she said plainly. Daddy is going to jail. The bad people can't hurt anyone. She considered that logic complete. You made them stop. I swallowed. I had help, but you found me. That was true. And in that truth, something inside me shifted. For weeks, I had felt like I was reacting. Cleaning up chaos, answering investigators, responding to betrayal. Now I understood something deeper. I wasn't just reacting. I had acted. I had trusted my instincts. I had followed the warning signs. I had pulled my daughter out of a grave. And I had refused to look away when the system tried to protect itself. That wasn't rage. That was strength. The final piece of clarity came from Agent Chen. She met me privately after Harrison's conviction. You understand, she said, that if you hadn't taken photos before touching anything, this case would have been harder. I was trained to secure evidence, I replied. She nodded. Most parents would have panicked. I did panic. You controlled it. She paused. You saved more than your daughter. I didn't respond immediately because that felt too heavy, too large. But as I drove home, I realized something. Vivian believed she was untouchable. Harrison believed his robe protected him. Wealthy parents believed money erased consequences. They were wrong. Because the turning point wasn't when they were arrested. It was when someone refused to stay silent. And that someone was me. Lily fell asleep easily that night. No nightmares. No screaming. Just steady breathing. I sat beside her bed and realized something else. The darkest part had passed. Not because pain disappeared, but because fear had been replaced with truth. And truth, once exposed, cannot be buried again. The fallout was still coming. Trials, sentences, public reckoning. But the power had shifted. And this time, it wasn't in their hands. It was in mine. Fallout doesn't explode all at once. It spreads. Through courtrooms, through headlines, through dinner tables where people suddenly realized they trusted the wrong names. The first trial was Vivian's. They laid it out piece by piece. Photos of the graves, financial records, testimonies from surviving children who described being left in pits for hours, days without food. One little boy, no older than 8, told the jury, "She said dirt makes bad kids clean." Vivian sat there the entire time, spine straight, lips tight. When asked if she regretted anything, she said calmly, "I regret that modern parents are too weak to discipline." No tears, No apology. The verdict took less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Multiple life sentences. No parole. She didn't look shocked when the sentence was read. She looked offended, as if the world had failed her. Harrison's trial was colder, more technical. Emails, LLC filings, judicial dismissals that aligned too perfectly with complaints against the retreat. One email was read aloud in court. Permanent placement authorized. Discretion required. The jury didn't need explanation. Life without parole. His gavel, his robe, his reputation. Gone. The wealthy parents came next. The pharmaceutical CEO. The state senator. The businessman. All charged with conspiracy tied to children who had discovered sensitive information. One parent broke down in court. "I just wanted it handled," he said. Handled. As if a child was a business inconvenience. He received 30 years. The senator received life. Public outrage was relentless, but none of it brought back the 7 children whose names I kept written in a notebook beside my bed. 7. I memorized them, because someone had to remember them as more than case numbers. Caleb's sentencing came quietly. 5 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole after 3. He stood in court, thinner than ever, voice steady but hollow. "I was weak," he said to the judge. "I allowed fear and money to replace judgment." He didn't look at me while he said it. When he finished, the judge spoke plainly. "You failed your child." Those 4 words hit harder than the sentence. Lily didn't attend. She was too young, and I refused to let her watch her father reduced to a criminal headline. The media eventually moved on. They always do. But fallout lingered locally. Some neighbors avoided eye contact. Others approached me quietly at grocery stores. "I'm sorry," one mother whispered. "I almost sent my son there." That sentence stayed with me. Almost. Because if I hadn't come home early, Lily would have been one of the names read aloud in court. Instead, she was alive, healing. Therapy became part of our routine, twice a week. At first, Lily refused to talk about the hole. Then slowly, she began drawing it. A dark square, a tiny stick figure inside. And then, another stick figure above. Me. One day, she told her therapist, "I don't think I was bad anymore. I think Grandma was wrong." That was progress. The nightmares didn't disappear immediately. She'd still wake sometimes, gasping. But instead of screaming apologies for being bad, she would whisper, "I'm safe." That word became our anchor. Safe. 2 years after her rescue, the final family court hearing arrived. Termination of parental rights. Permanent custody. Caleb had signed consent as part of his plea. The judge looked down at Lily and me. "Ms. Blackwood," she said, "the court finds you to be a fit and protective parent. Full legal custody is granted. Parental rights of Caleb Blackwood are permanently terminated." It sounded clinical. Final. Lily squeezed my hand tightly. When we walked out of the courthouse, she asked, "So Daddy can't take me back?" "No," I said gently. "He can't." She nodded slowly. "Okay." No tears. No hesitation. Just quiet acceptance. That night we celebrated with pizza and ice cream. Nothing extravagant. Just peace. Halfway through the movie, Lily leaned against me. "You didn't yell," she said thoughtfully. "When?" "At Grandma. At Daddy." I thought about that. "No," I said. "I didn't." "Why?" "Because I didn't need to." She considered that deeply. "Does that mean you're stronger?" I smiled faintly. "Strength isn't loud." She nodded, satisfied. Years passed. The headlines faded, but healing stayed intentional. Lily joined soccer, straight-A student, confident, curious. At 12, she volunteered at a children's shelter on weekends. "It makes me feel like I'm doing something," she told me once. She understood something at 12 that many adults never do. Pain can either shrink you or shape you. Sometimes the weight hits unexpectedly. While making breakfast, while driving, while hearing wind rustle trees at night, I'll remember lifting her out of that hole, her tiny arms gripping my neck, and I'll think about the other children, the ones who didn't get lifted out. I carry their names with me, 7 of them. I say them sometimes quietly before bed, not out loud. but enough that I never forget. Donald retired a year after the convictions. System was rotten longer than I realized, he admitted over barbecue one afternoon. He looked at Lily laughing in the yard. You'd never know what she went through. I nodded. But I know, and that's enough. Because fallout isn't just about punishment. It's about what survives after. Vivian rots in prison. Harrison lost everything. 23 people convicted in total, hundreds of years combined sentences, millions paid in restitution. But none of that is the real victory. The real victory is Lily walking into middle school without fear. The real victory is her laughing without flinching. The real victory is that she knows what monsters look like now, and she knows they're not untouchable. But the story doesn't end neatly, because last week Marcus texted me. Another discipline retreat in Ohio under investigation. Similar setup. Isolated property. Religious framing. Complaints dismissed. He asked if I wanted details. I stared at the message for a long time because justice doesn't end evil. It interrupts it. And some battles don't disappear. They shift locations. But that part of my life, the fighter, no longer belongs to war zones overseas. It belongs here, to protecting the child sitting across from me at the dinner table, and to making sure she never confuses fear with love again. Only one part remains, the lesson, and what I've learned from all of it. 5 years have passed. Lily is 12 now, tall, confident, captain of her soccer team. She argues about curfews and math homework like any other middle schooler. She rolls her eyes when I hover too much. She hugs me when she thinks I need it. The nightmares are rare now, maybe once every few months. When they come, she doesn't scream apologies anymore. She wakes up, breathes, and says, "I'm okay." And she is. Caleb writes letters from prison once a month. He says he's sober now, that he's taken parenting classes, that he understands what he did was unforgivable. He's eligible for parole next year. I haven't decided what that means for Lily yet. She will decide. Because control over her life will never again belong to someone who mistakes obedience for love. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and the wind brushes the oak tree out front, I think about that night, about the unlocked door, about the hole, about the 3 days that separated my daughter from becoming a name on a report. I used to wonder if justice was enough, if prison sentences could balance graves, if exposing corruption could heal trauma. The truth is, justice doesn't undo harm. It prevents more of it. And sometimes that has to be enough. I'm not a hero. I didn't save everyone. 7 children still didn't make it home. I carry that. But I also carry something else, the knowledge that instinct matters, that silence protects the wrong people, that weakness can be just as dangerous as cruelty. And I've taught Lily something I wish more children were taught early. If someone says they love you, but they scare you, that's not love. If someone demands obedience instead of trust, that's not protection. And if something feels wrong in your bones, you don't ignore it. You act. Lily is alive. She is healing. She knows monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they quote scripture. Sometimes they share your last name. But they all have one weakness. They believe they're untouchable. And they're wrong. If it ever happens again, somewhere else, with different names, I'll fight it again, not as a soldier overseas, but as a mother who knows exactly what's at stake. That's my victory. That's my war now. And I would choose it again, every single time.